embarking today on subtracting fractions. Notice the frowny face in the G. This is the ugliest of the fractions. But if you've gone to the first one, multiplying, second one, dividing, third one, adding fractions, by the time you get here, maybe it's not so bad. This is going to be just like adding fractions with one little pickle in it at the end of some subtraction issues, but we'll get to that when we get there. So today, subtracting fractions. Not as much of a problem as you might think. So over here, the same key questions we have, the same key as adding fractions. One, do you have a common denominator? If yes, use that common denominator, follow your sign. If no, you ask the second question, will a smaller denominator fit evenly inside your larger denominator? If so, use your larger denominator, adjust your numerators, follow your sign. And our character here is the combinator. He will save the day for adding and subtracting only. He doesn't matter for multiplying and dividing. He doesn't do that, but he needs to be there to save the day for adding and subtracting. The common denominator, the combinator. And we talked about that on our last one with adding fractions. So let's go on to subtracting fractions. We have some here that I'm going to just work through with you. Here we have a whole number with no fraction on it, and we're going to see how do we deal with that. Then over here, we have uncommon denominators, and we're going to have to do some borrowing again, which you'll see over there a little bit. And then over here, we have some practical stuff. We're going to kind of see how that might work in a given situation. All right, so let's go. 9 minus 1 2/3. And again, this is written horizontally. I prefer the vertical method because it's just easier for me to see everything in front of me that way. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. 9 minus 1 2/3. One thing that's important as you're doing fractions is to keep in your mind that there are two separate issues going on here. You have a fraction group or a fraction little activity club or something, and then a whole number club. And you have to be dressed right to get into these, which will come in handy to kind of think that way later. So here we just subtract. Right to left, just like you would whole numbers. 2/3 away from, oh, we got nothing. Can't take anything away from nothing, so we have to put something there. So we have to borrow, which will make this 8. Now we need to bring, we borrowed 1 from the 9, but we can't just put the 1 here. That was a whole number. We can't subtract a fraction from a whole number. So we have to change that whole number into a fraction that we can use. And the fraction that we happen to be using right now is thirds. So we need to change that 1 into some kind of thirds. So how many thirds is 1? Well, if you have something split up into thirds, how many pieces of these thirds make the whole thing? We got 1, 2, 3. So 3 thirds equals 1. The same 1 that we borrowed from the 9. So we borrowed 1 from the 9, making it 8. Borrowed the 1, and that comes over here into the fraction club, dressed now like the third, because this is the thirds club, so it has to be dressed right uniform on. So now it's there. Now we can just subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. And thirds, we already have the common denominator. The combinator is there, so we can do that. And then we just subtract here. 8 minus 1 is 7. And we don't need to reduce. We can't cancel out. And we aren't top heavy there, so it's 7 1/3. That's pretty easy. The thing to remember, though, is how we got to this. When we borrowed 1, we had to change it into a fraction matching the denominator that we're already using. That will come up again here in just a second, but it may look a little differently, but it's not. It's the same thing. So there you go. That's subtraction of fractions in that way. So let's go over and try this one. This one's a little bit more complicated than that one is. There's one more step to do, but there's only one more step in addition to this one. So it's not that big of a deal. We just follow our two questions. Is there a common denominator? No. So, will the smaller one fit evenly inside the larger one? Answer here in this case is no. So we can't just use the larger one and adjust. So we just multiply them. 5 times 2 is 10. Now I'm going to walk through that, how I would do it in my head as I'm writing it down, so you can kind of see me think aloud, as it were. So here we are. I'm going to rewrite this. 11 3/5 minus 9 1/2. I asked my first question, common denominator? No. As soon as I know the answer is no, I immediately do this so I don't have to think so much. As soon as I know what the denominator is, I can just plug it in. And because I rewrote my whole numbers, I won't forget about them. They're just right in front of me. So 5 times 2 is 10. So I can just write that in there. Don't have to think too much. And then I come to the part of how did I get from 2 to 10? Well, I multiplied by 5. That's the other denominator. And if I do it on the bottom, I got to do it on the top. So there's my adjustment there. Same thing here. 5 times 2 is 10. Got to do it on the bottom, got to do it on the top. So we've got 6 there. Now, we just subtract. We subtract 6 minus 5 is 1, and it's 1/10. So we're good there. And 11 minus 9, well, that's just going to be 2. So 2 and 1/10. And that was easy. Now let's get over here to this one. Over here we have a situation where we're overlapping metal or wood or something, and as we have to do 2 layers here, maybe it's for a hard surface to walk on or for equipment to be rolled around or whatever, this needs to be not there. Maybe there's going to be a wall here, maybe there's another thing that's going to be overlapped here, but we need to allow some room. So we need to calculate, well, how much room is there so that we can see if we have the right amount of room. So we need to figure this out. How do we find out the difference between the red one and the black one, the difference? Well, in math, whenever somebody's finding the difference of something, difference is subtraction. You find the difference, you subtract. So we're going to subtract these two things. So we're going to have 4 and 5/8 minus 2 and 7/8. So I'm just going to rewrite that here. 4, and actually I'm going to scoot that over. 4 and 5/8 minus 2 and 7/8. So now I do my key thing. I ask the 2 questions. First question, is there a common denominator? Yes, okay, the common denominator is already there. The combinator is already there. So I don't have to adjust any numerators. I can just go right ahead. If I have common denominators, follow my sign. So I can just subtract right away. 5 minus 7 is, can't take 7 away from 5, so I have to borrow. This is the extra step ugliness that is in subtraction, but it's only one little step. Okay, so I know that I need to do some things. So because I know I need to do some things, I'm going to go ahead and do this. That one number is not going to change, so I can just rewrite that. And I know I'm going to borrow 1 from the 4 that makes it a 3, similar to what we did over there. So I can rewrite the 3. And I know this is going to be 8ths. So all I really need to worry about, the only thing I need to do in all of these steps really, is worry about that one thing. And it's just one thing. If we can get it in our minds that it's just one thing, not a whole mess of things, it kind of can calm us down and help us focus. So how do we figure out what that is? Well, remember I said earlier about the clubs? Here's the 8ths club. And this is the whole number club. So we need to somehow or another change this 1 into 8ths. Well, that's going to equal how many 8ths? 8 8ths is 1. So we have 5 already. Don't forget about this. We have 5 8ths already. Now we borrowed 8 more. So 8 plus 5 is 13 8ths now. It's like there were 5 8ths hanging out waiting for everybody to get there. So 5 8ths were just sitting there like in the 8th team. And they're waiting for everybody else to get to the restaurant or whatever. So there's 5 sitting at the booth waiting on everybody else. But then we borrow 1, 8 8ths. So 8 more show up. 8 of the 8th team show up. So now we have 5 sitting there. We have 8 more show up. So we have 13 out of the 8th club show up. So now we have 13. Now we can go ahead and subtract. Now once I do this, I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you a shortcut. But hopefully, understanding the concept will help you remember how to do it just in case you forget the shortcut. Okay, so 13 minus 7 is now 6. And it's 8ths because it's the 8th club. And then we have 3 minus 2 is 1. So we find out that as we overlap these 2 pieces of material, the gap that we have here is going to be 1 and 6/8. But then notice that the 6 and the 8ths can be reduced. So it's going to be 1, and we can cancel here. There is a number that can go into both of those. 2 can go into both of those. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So we would reduce that to 1 and 3/4. It's easy. Now the shortcut. The shortcut, I'm going to do it in orange, hopefully it shows up, but I'll overlap it with another color just in case. The shortcut, whenever you need to borrow, if you get to 4 and 5/8 minus 7/8, for example, and you need to figure out this number here, take this number, womp, womp, boom. So we take that number plus this number, that will get us that number. And it works every time that way. Just add the two parts of the fraction, that gets you your new numerator whenever you have to borrow. So whenever you have to borrow, we've got to borrow that, make it 3, these two, add up to that one, and then go there. But the reason it works is the longer reason that we went around. So that's subtraction of fractions. Not as ugly as you might think, and that's it. See you next time.